Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Wyoming Connections. We're happy to have you join us today. Today, we're going to be exploring the role of political cartoons in our political discourse. We here at the Wyoming Humanities are focused on strengthening Wyoming's democracy through the humanities. My name is Sean Reese, and I'm the CEO of Wyoming Humanities. These past few months and going into April, we're really focused here at Wyoming Humanities on democracy and civility and how we can come together in our communities and our states to solve complex problems in a constructive way, recognizing that we're coming from different perspectives. And one of the important things about being a citizen and being engaged with our communities and our neighborhoods and our state and our nation is understanding what's going on around us, the news, and keeping informed. And political cartoons happen to be a very interesting way of connecting people to what's going on in a way that is different than just the straight up news, introducing humor, poking fun at ourselves and our circumstances. For me, growing up in Cheyenne in the 70s and 80s, my family, we subscribed to two newspapers, the Tribune Eagle and the Casper Star Tribune. I can remember as a kid in the mornings with my bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios going through the Casper Star Tribune, navigating my way to the comics page. I was a big fan of Doonesbury and Bloom County and Calvin and Hobbes. But on my way to the comics page, I'd always start with the Old Grouch on the front page of the Casper Star Tribune. These were little snippets of making light of the front page news. So I tried to figure out what is the Old Grouch commenting on and look at that particular article. Then I'd go to the editorial section and I would read the cartoon of one of our guests today, Greg Carney, and try to understand what is this saying? What is the news? Do I understand what this is about? And often asking my dad before I'd go on to my favorite comics. So I've grown up appreciating not only Greg Carney's work, but also the importance of political cartoons. And we're so happy to have two different generations of political cartoonists here today to talk about their craft and their function in their communities and in the news and with the public. So we're very happy to have with us today Greg Carney and Ryan Stolpe. And you'll be able to learn more about these two individuals in our What's Your Why podcast that you can find on our website or your favorite podcast platform. Greg is an independent syndicated cartoonist. He draws cartoons for newspapers across the United States, and he's spent over 20 years as an editorial cartoonist for the Casper Star Tribune. Ryan Stolpe, who we'll start our conversation with, is our other guest. He loves the visual language of cartoons, and he is a writer and illustrator for Lift Lines, which is a mountain life-oriented editorial cartoon that runs in the Jackson Hole Daily and on Instagram. And I am happy that today I became his 6,101st follower on that account. So with that, Greg, I am going to turn this over to you and look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Hey, so I'm Ryan. Appreciate everybody tuning in today. It's really, really cool for me to get to chat with Greg today, just kind of about political cartoons back and forth. I think we both come at it from a different perspective. I know that my journey started doodling as a kid and drawing cartoons for t-shirts and clubs, really anytime drawing with friends. But I really got into cartooning, had a really neat opportunity in college to take a class on visual language and how pictures can have a grammar to them, and you can you can explain a story really quickly with a picture in a way that isn't linear. If you were in the reading word, if you're reading an example. And I think that's the power of cartoons. I've gotten to apply it to design, and I couldn't ever get it out of my system, and have since been doing Lift Lines now, which is a 3 times a week comic in the daily and on Instagram. That's kind of focused in the small community of Jackson, Wyoming, and kind of the adventure outdoors style. And it's given me a really neat lens through which to play with political cartoons or commentary on local or national politics, having a kind of narrower audience than maybe Greg does, of a kind of a common language of activity and interest and perspective. So it's been really fun for me, a really neat opportunity, and it's evolved a lot. So really excited to share with you some cartoons later today and kind of talk about the process and how they come together. And I think the behind the scenes of how the sausage is made with political jokes and comics and cartoons and editorials in general. Greg, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
This is called dead air. Yeah, I'm Greg Carney. I am fairly well known in Wyoming because I was the one and only political cartoonist for a long time in Wyoming, working at the Casper Star Tribune when it was owned by the Howard family. I have to say that civility and cartoonists are words seldom used together. I started drawing pure political cartoons in high school when I grew up in Maine, as anybody who listens to my accent probably can detect. And went on from high school, went on to draw political cartoons for the student newspaper at Brigham Young University, which is a place with a whole herd of sacred cows just waiting to be gored. And then got this job at the Tribune. And it's been very difficult in the recent years for cartoonists to continue working as we once did for newspapers. And I was fortunate enough to have built up a large enough stable of syndication that I was able to continue that way. My specialty is state and local cartoons. In Wyoming, I am also seen in the Jackson Hole Daily, which has a mountain of riches when it comes to cartoonists, it seems, for such a small paper and such a small community. I also draw for papers in the lead newspapers in Montana, a whole host of small daily, weekly agricultural newspapers across the upper Midwest, a bunch of papers in Kansas and Oklahoma, and my home state of Maine. So I have, been at this for quite a long time. My cartoons, they're not showing them on the screen here, but my cartoons are very traditional looking black and white drawings because most of my papers are so small they don't have the means to reproduce color. About 170 papers worldwide, some in Australia, a number of them in Canada, and it's been published in England and most of the English-speaking world, it seems like. And so I will turn this back over to you, Ryan, I guess, so that we start our conversation.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, I love the opportunity to kind of walk through three comics, cartoons that we selected. I do have the luxury of being in color, running my comic as a partnership with Origin Media in the Jackson Hole Daily, as well as the internet. I think getting to post online has changed cartooning for me. And it's a great one to start off with, this hunter comic, because there was a story beyond just its existence in the paper. Being on the internet, it generated a lot of conversation and commentary. And as a cartoonist, it's kind of neat in the current era to be able to engage with your audience and how they're interpreting it and how they're consuming it, and starting a civil discussion. If you're following along, the caption and the comic is two hunters walking away from a still burning fire in the fall. And one hunter is speaking to the other. I don't know why hunters have such a bad rap with their backcountry ethics. I mean, we were the original conservationists. And this comic really speaks to me. I was a wilderness ranger in Western North Carolina for a season, and was really big on fire ethics and leave no trace. This cartoon in particular ran during a weekend of a lot of drought here in Jackson. So being in the mountains where we are, a lot of our water comes from snow, and we have an intense fire season. And there were maybe 20 different small fires that started in east of the Tetons and in Idaho area. And it coincided with hunting season. And I really wanted to draw kind of a full circle, because I see these different outdoor cultures, whether you're a skier or a hunter or someone who likes to hike, they kind of have a culture of their own ethics. And I really wanted to draw attention to the fact that hunter outdoorsman types really were the first people pushing for public lands conservation, management, and just kind of stewardship of our wild resources. As the original conservationists, I think it's a badge that they wear proudly. But there was clearly a disconnect in maybe the knowledge base that was moving around the kind of the habits that we have as a culture when we get outside. This comic did get a couple, I think people felt called out as a hunter when I ran it in the paper and on Instagram. A lot of finger pointing, but it did start a discussion between the kind of like hiker, photographer types and the people that were getting out in hunting season, and kind of actually looking to the facts of like, well, these fires that started were actually tied back to this community, and we should call it out and highlight it. So it was neat to see at least a conversation happening between people and two user groups that I would say don't always overlap. So the next cartoon, in a similar vein, I think really uses this outdoors Jackson micro lens. It's a neat, I feel like being here in town is kind of like a college campus, or being a student newspaper cartoonist, because everyone kind of has a similar, at least awareness of pieces. So this one in particular, I do like to run comics frequently that deal with a pretty big issue in our community, which is the dangers of skiing in the backcountry. So avalanche awareness, being prepared, having the right knowledge, partners, and a plan, as we say. This comic ran in the summertime, which is unusual to run a ski comic in the summer, right during the, right after the George Floyd protests in DC. And as we have probably all seen the famous photo of Trump holding up a Bible upside down in front of the historic church backdrop. And it was very much just about the image of power for him, and an image of association with a book of knowledge, a book of faith. And I think there is certainly a divergence in our culture locally in Jackson about people associating, oh yeah, I get in the backcountry, I know I have all the equipment, I read the book, I took the course. But does it really mean something? Like, what's your deeper connection to it? And are you just posturing, or is it something that you've actually engaged with? And so it was neat to kind of bring that perspective on a national level of Trump in front of the church back to a local level of, hey, it doesn't have to be about religion or social unrest and protests. We need to all wear it on our shoulder of what we stand for, and how we're going to be authentic to each other. So that one, whenever I draw a picture of Trump, I also get a lot of comments on Instagram, which has been a neat way to engage with people that I might not see every day here in Jackson. The next cartoon is a personal favorite of mine, and one that I don't think landed very well, but I included it anyways because as a cartoonist, we're allowed to have our favorites too. This one I think had a lot going on, maybe too much. It happened around right leading up to the 2020 presidential election, and everyone was really watching all the polls about how close it would be. And I wanted to kind of draw a parallel to a kind of ski culture thing, that the equipment or the binding doesn't make the skier. And so, excuse me, I have someone that's mounting their ski bindings on the ski, and traditionally you want it to be perfectly center on the ski. They leave a mark point, you measure it, you want it to be squared up. And people pay a lot of attention to getting it just right and balanced on the ski. But at the end of the day, it's not just the binding that's part of our democracy, just like it's not the president that sets the, that is democracy in America. So the POTUS, President of the United States binding, it is a component of how we get down the hill, so to speak, or how we function as a democracy, but it's not the end all. And I wanted to draw a point that everyone's really focused on this high level, very front and center face of democracy, but there's a lot of components that come together. So I, again, really liked the ability to play off of a kind of a microculture joke in our outdoor community here, and kind of put a perspective on a national level. Greg, I'd love to see some of the cartoons that you've got, or actually, I think we're moving on to the cartoon caption winner announcement. Craig and I each put together a cartoon. This was one that I made. This was right after the January 6th storming of the Capitol. I was still kind of processing it. And it was an interesting one for me too, because I ended up playing with how the faces were. So I've moved to drawing digitally on an iPad, and it was interesting to play with if they were smiling or not smiling. It totally changed the tone of the joke, and I think it led to some interesting submissions from the many that we got. I apologize. I need to pull up the captions. We're going to announce the winners. There's an honorable mention and a apologies. I think my window closed. Okay, so my bad. The honorable mention, $25 winner. I like your flag. I think that one's awesome because I think there's always something that we can unite about. Whether you're riding the bus together, you both ride buses. I like your flag. Second prize, winning $75 for the caption. How's the hate working out for you? I actually really appreciate this one. I think in the circles, the news that I consume, it seems to be a lot of one-sided, that there's hate on one side, but I think that hate can come in a lot of forms. A lot of it's a strong emotion, and I think it's an important one to draw back to the conversation that we're all humans. We all feel the same things, and hate can corrupt everyone on all sides. The first prize by Voters' Choice for winning $100. Sometimes we all forget that one nation under God part. And I couldn't agree more that we're all on the same team in America. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at. I had a personal tagline that was not included with the comic. And I kind of came at it from a point of really wrestling with the January 6th, just trying to process it all and how do we get back to a civil discussion. And I just wanted to break the ice. And so it was a simple, hey, which I think we could all practice a little bit more of, saying hello to people that may not look or act or have the same values as us, to kind of hear their perspective and their lived experience. So Greg, I'd love to see some of the comics that you selected to pick out and hear a little bit behind the scenes.
Okay, there we go. Unlike Ryan, I don't have the luxury particularly of focusing on one community. My work has to have bearing on a larger community. This was a cartoon. It says the Billings Gazette. My cartoon service customizes the signature for the individual papers that get them. I draw a lot about Yellowstone because I draw for both Billings and Jackson, and it kind of sloshes over between the two papers a great deal. And nationally, people are interested in Yellowstone too. And this was a cartoon which came up with that there was apparently gold to be found in Yellowstone, other than the real gold, not the tourist paying money kind of gold. And so I thought, well, who would be most interested in finding gold? Well, of course, it would have to be Yosemite Sam. So there he is standing by this ranger who's got this kind of disgusted look on his face saying, I hear there's gold. One feature of my cartoons, which you can always look for if you're getting the Jackson paper and seeing them, or the Billings paper, is you can look for Vic the Cat. Vic the Cat is always in the bottom. Vic the Cat was named for a mentor of mine way back in high school named Victor Runtz, who had a little cat in his cartoons. And after Mr. Runtz died, I picked up his cat and carried it along with me. And he's saying, that's all, folks. So we'll go to the next one here. I draw a lot of cartoons and they get sent all over the world. And there's one thing that international news outlets love more than anything else, for some reason, is stories of tourists getting gored by buffalo. They think that is the greatest thing they've ever seen. And this cartoon actually ran in Agence France Presse, the French national news agency, ran this and had me redraw the caption in it into French so that their readers would get the joke. But I'm always amazed that people will go right up to these huge wild animals that are larger than a car and like poke at them and stuff. And so this is the cartoon joke about I'm with stupid, the t-shirt you can buy. And so this bison is saying, I'm with stupid, while this woman is approaching it from behind with a camera. Vic is saying, hold still now. It's just amazing to me. This happens every year. I have drawn something like this for at least 20, every year for 20 years, it seems like. I draw something akin to this cartoon. It's just a never-ending story. And the French in particular just love this story, and they just eat it up. We'll go on to the next one. As you can see, my cartoons are not in color, and it's because my papers generally don't run in color, and so there's not a lot of encouragement for me to draw in color. I do it occasionally. This one kind of exposes my age, I guess. Ryan may have no idea what I'm referring to in this drawing, but this is a famous scene from television, from All in the Family, the television show, which dealt with a very conservative father and his liberal son-in-law who is living in the same house with him, and his daughter and his wife. And this cartoon repurposes that famous tableau that they always started the show with, to show that this was all in the family, the Wyoming GOP edition. And you'll notice they're all elephants except for the son-in-law, which is always in the back of these tableaus. And if you look real closely, you'll see that he's a rhino. So this is a kind of a joke on, in Wyoming, we live in a state with essentially one-party rule, really. It's kind of like I hate to make a comparison, it's kind of like the old Soviet Union, where one party ran the whole show. And so there are very subtle differences between Republicans in Wyoming, with some of them being, of course, called rhino. Vic the cat, and I can't even read his caption here very well. So if somebody can make it out, they can tell me what it says. So all of these cartoons rely on somewhat on cultural here. Oh, there we go. We're just sweeping the dirty dishes under the rug, is what the cat says. Because everybody likes to say, I'm a fellow Republican. All of these depend on kind of a cultural knowledge of something. Well, maybe not the bison. Well, even the bison. The joke depends on a kind of a shared cultural knowledge. Yosemite Sam, we associate him with miners. I'm with stupid T-shirts, which is why the cartoon works. And in this one, it really harkens back to a period of time in the late 70s or early 80s, of all things, with a television show that I suspect not as many young people remember or have ever seen, but that's the All in the Family motif. We'll now move on to here's another one. Here's a Jackson one. This was done specifically. There was this story out of Jackson, and it got onto the wire services, which I love, because I get to draw a local cartoon and then fan it out to everybody in the country, which is always handy. And I love this cartoon. I love the bear's expression in this cartoon. There was a bear in Jackson which had the imaginative name of 399. Who comes up with these names? Can't they give them better names and numbers? And apparently bear number 399 was running around through town and getting into people's beehives and eating stuff he shouldn't, and just generally being a pest. And so the story basically was why this is bad for bears to eat all this junk food. This coming from humans. And so we have the human, and he's got a bag of McDonald's, and the bear is looking at him and saying, "You're one to talk," which, of all the species to be, holding up, the bear for doing bear things, eating honey, and the Vic the cat is saying he's smarter than the average bear. So this is a great little local Jackson story, but it got up on the wire services, so I got to send this all over the world to everybody, because, again, there's another one that the French really love these stories out of Western Wyoming for some reason. I don't know what it is about the French. My editor, got any cartoons about Western Wyoming? So anyway, we would next one. Okay, here's the cartoon caption and so we have three. We have the honorable mention. Now we have the Trump guy and the Biden guy, and I left the little voice markers so that you could decide who said what or what you wanted it to say. And the honorable mention, the Trump guy is saying, we've got to get away from politics and discuss something rational. And the Biden guy is saying, agreed. How about Coke versus Pepsi, cats versus dogs, or a pineapple on pizza? And the cat is saying Coke, cats, and no pineapple. No. And then the second prize did not have the people saying anything, so they're just kind of glaring at each other. And the cat is saying, when all else fails, let's drag the cat into this thing. And the first prize winner for $100, if I'd known there was $100 at stake, I would have entered my own contest, is how do I get stuck with these two? And the caption that actually accompanied this cartoon, the Trump guy is saying real loudly with exclamation points, communist. And the Biden guy is saying real loud with exclamation points, fascist. And Vic the cat is saying, can't we all just get along? Which doesn't look like we can. So now, Ryan, I guess we're up now for having our little conversation here.
Yeah, awesome.
So
I similarly have drawn probably 10 bison cartoons. I was initiated into that culture when someone brought the baby bison into the back of their Explorer, which had a really sad outcome, and they had to put the bison down. And I think it's important to draw attention to the fact that it is wildlife, and we need to treat it as such. I'm really curious, actually. You're a bit more in political cartoon world than I am. I'll dabble with it, but sometimes I just need a good pun. Do you have a favorite setup, or do you feel like political cartooning doesn't suit that as well? I'm talking like a Shrink. We've all seen the Shrink one, or a corporate boardroom. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually use, I do a lot of caricature. So I spend a lot of time with single person, large heads, single person politicians saying, usually something they never said, but what you think they probably would have said if truth had been in the offering. So that's usually that's one of my kind of go-to sequences. I kind of picked it up particularly from Vic Runtz and also from Roy Peterson, who was the cartoonist at the Vancouver Sun in Canada, who was very famous for drawing these real elaborate single-person caricatures.
Yeah, I really admire your style. I think caricatures are a really tough one to hit. There's a cartoonist, Ann Telnius, for the Washington Post, who just like turns everything up to 11 in her caricatures, which I've always enjoyed. And there's always new faces to follow. I'm kind of curious. This is a pretty pertinent thing. I'm only just starting to read about it. I think as a political cartoonist, we're always absorbing stuff. But how do you see cartoons as like a part of the current discussion versus a kind of a record of our culture? I'm really thinking about Dr. Seuss and the recent decision to cease publication on a couple of his books. He started out as a political cartoonist, his famous one with the ostrich in the sand. And it kind of conversations that I'm seeing around are, well, the culture has changed. So, the racist themes and undertones, colonialism in his books doesn't have a place to be educated, to kind of be in the current conversation with kids, but it is a record of how people thought when that book was published.
His publishers ought to take a look at his editorial cartoons from just prior to World War II if they want to see some racial stereotypes being bandied about. I have a college background, a graduate degree in American studies, and I value history. I don't think that we can I don't think it's wise to simply erase from the public memory what people thought at one time. that said, I think we can put these things into their proper context. We can explain to people this was, Yertle the turtle was banned in Germany prior to World War II because Yertle the turtle is a satire of Adolf Hitler. And I hate to feel like we're gonna fall into this very trap of the people that my parents' generation spent untold amounts of time, effort, and in some cases blood to keep us from going in that direction. And it kind of gets back to, and the Dr. Seuss thing is kind of a thing. I think you could put an explanation in the front of the book explaining the time period that this was drawn in, and that some of the portrayals may be offensive to modern readers. That's what Disney has done with some of their older work that portrays things. And I don't think that we remove from the cultural marker. We still print works by Mark Twain, which are filled with some pretty offensive language, to be perfectly honest with you, but we still print them. And in fact, we still require them to be read in most high schools in this country, because those things have value in teaching us what we were and in teaching us how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. And if we eliminate them, just like if we eliminate, while I can understand taking down statues of some white guy on a horse who fought for the Confederacy and perhaps moving it to the grounds of a museum where it can be properly explained and properly referenced, I get rather more concerned when they start removing monuments to the war dead of the Civil War, no matter which side they fought on. These young men gave their lives for what they believed in, even if what they believed in is not something we believe in today. And we should not desecrate graves, essentially, in the name of purging ourselves of an unpleasant memory.
Well, and you kind of need to have at least an awareness of the past to see progress into the future.
Well, particularly with my cartoons, you particularly do.
Yeah. You've been at it a lot longer
Ryan,
than I have.
You need to go watch All in the Family now so that you get the joke.
You were on the money. It was over my head, but I'm sure I've made some illustrations of memes that maybe didn't land with you either. I very much, I actually think that's an interesting piece. So we all know memes, picture with big text on top of it. I think the internet is a golden era of humor in the internet, and a meme is kind of a cartoon.
It's kind of a cartoon. It's kind of a
caption.
The trouble is that people are using other people's images.
Totally. It's certainly copyright.
Which is has a.
But so I think it's amazing to see the collaboration, though, because memes evolve on an hourly basis. Like something that was funny in the beginning then becomes self-referential, and then someone else will remix it. It's kind of like these jokes that burn so hot and fast and evolve.
So what have you had? Do you have subjects about which you will not draw, or which you should not draw? Maybe we should say
question.
That.
I actually had a really interesting conversation with a couple followers this last week, and I wanted to make a strong point about why I took the stance that I did. For some context, it was a comic about, we have a group here in town called the Jackson Hole Babe Force, and they sponsor a scholarship for people to take an avalanche awareness course. And so I had a joke about this woman using the Force. It was a Star Wars joke, which was a fun thing for me, getting someone out of an avalanche. And it happened to coincide, very unfortunately, with a death here in town. And so it's a tough one for me because while my comics are local and specific, I do have followers all over the country, and I can't keep up with every small piece of, an unfortunate event. And I got blown up online a lot by people who knew this person and felt it was really distasteful to talk about it. And I stood firm on believing that, it wasn't about the person. It was a bad timing that we were talking about an avalanche death. But they said avalanches are never funny. You should never make jokes about that. And I like to think that the jokes that I made about it come from a point of awareness and reminding ourselves that they're dangerous, and that we need to talk about them, because when you stop having it front and center in your brain when you're going outside in that type of terrain, that's when you make mistakes. So, how about yourself?
Death is always a problem for cartoonists. I have a couple of rules that I always follow. First of all, because my work is primarily dealing with state and local politics and with agricultural economics, believe it or not, there's an esoteric subject to try to draw about. I have a couple of rules that I don't have editors, which I really wish I did. I used to have editors back in Casper who would stop me from doing crazy stuff. But now I just, I live alone, and I don't have anybody to say, Greg, stop that. My late wife used to do that for me until she passed away. And now I'm flying solo all along, which is probably a bad thing. But I have a couple of rules I don't follow. I seldom drew about Donald Trump because I was drawing local and state cartoons. I wasn't drawing national, every cartoonist in the country was flailing away at Donald Trump, and it was like shooting fish in a barrel.
He's an easy one to draw.
Yeah, well, yeah, he provides you so much material. But I do not draw the First Lady of the United States. She did not run for office. She just came along for the ride. I won't draw about her because it's unfair. And if there's ever a woman president, I won't draw about her spouse either, because they're not politicians. They're not public facing. They did not stand up and say, elect me. I will not draw about the minor children of the president. So like Barron Trump, I will not draw him. I did not draw him, and I would not draw him. Joe Biden's too old to be having minor children, so I don't have to worry about that. But no, I mean, that is totally unfair. I won't do it. But these are my personal markers, and that I lay down. I'm very careful about drawing about tragedy, but yet I did draw a cartoon about avalanche safety right after those people died, because avalanches are dangerous, and people tend to have a very cavalier attitude, and they get up there on those ridge lines, and they buzz across them with their snow machines or something, and the next thing someday one's going to come crashing down in the middle of Jackson and tear up the town or something.
They do. We have a lot of skier triggered ones on the road. So just like the First Lady, you didn't choose to be in that terrain, Yeah. You're just driving to work.
Yeah, well, I had a really funny cartoon about driving to work on Wyoming 22, and so.
So it sounds like you have a good sense of like there is civility in comics. There's conventions and there's lines that we draw. For sure.
Yeah, well, we all do. And I used to have an editor. I mean, I had a favorite cartoon that Dick High said was the funniest thing he ever saw, and that it wasn't going to run in a family newspaper.
I have a side pot. I call it my internet only. Or maybe
I didn't have the internet as a luxury at that time. Yeah. They just kind of, Dick High would frame them and put them on the wall, the Star Tribune, all the cartoons that didn't get into the paper that he wished he could have drawn, but he knew he wasn't going to get it by Rob Earless. So
totally. How have you dealt with controversy? A cartoon maybe that hasn't landed well. Is there a context to it, or do you? I kind of take the referee approach of like you can't ever go back on a call because you lose
No, I don't go
Howard
back
statement.
on. I don't go back on a call. I had a famous cartoon one time. There was an airplane accident in Denver, in which it turned out that the airplane hadn't been de-iced properly, and it tried to take off. It couldn't. It weighed on the wing. It crashed. I don't know. This was like back in the '80s sometime, and I drew a cartoon of the airplane at the Denver airport. This is the old Stapleton airport. This wasn't the new one. And the snow was little skull and crossbones. And there were like thousands of them falling on this plane. And you don't think I didn't hear about it. I sure as heck did. And this was a time when working at the Star Tribune, I had a phone number, I had a desk in the newsroom, and it was when people could come into it may seem quaint to you, but it used to be that the newsroom at the Star Tribune was an open room. You could come right in off the street, walk in the front door, take a right turn, and you would walk right into the newsroom, and you could sit there and scream at Dick Eye all you wanted. Which I really liked. I think, we've allowed newspapers to become like banks. Last time I was in the Star Tribune office, it was like, literally like a bank. These people were behind glass,
It could have just been COVID.
Well, yeah, I think they were worried somebody was going to come in there with a gun and shoot them. And I said, if that's the case, this is Wyoming. The staff should be armed as well. But people just went crazy with that cartoon, and they were angry and they were upset. And it wasn't even a flight, from Denver to Casper or anywhere in Wyoming. I don't know where it was going. And eventually I just had to say, look, the proper maintenance of aircraft, particularly in high altitude winter environments like we live in, is a matter of public concern. And it deserved a strong cartoon. And you're right, I'd kind of take the referee approach. No, I don't apologize for what I draw. Yeah. I'm sorry that people may have took it wrong, but
it's coming from a place
and you got unscrambled eggs.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's interesting. You have a longer perspective on it, and as someone that's always been in a paper, but then as papers have moved online, have you seen increase in outrage over your comics because they can exist without the context of a news story next to it, or they can go viral? I mean, I think we see it kind of back to the cancel culture thing. Like Twitter can put a label on something and say, here's a little bit of context for this piece, or this is not factually accurate. But what's been your experience kind of having a longer timeline in how people are responding to your cartoons?
I think that people have gotten a lot more squeamy about stuff. They tend to get, it's more not, it used to be, I don't like this cartoon and I disagree with Greg Carney. And it's now, Greg Carney shouldn't be allowed to draw cartoons in your paper. And I always stress every time, everywhere, in every environment, that cartoons are signed opinions.
Yeah, they're not anonymous.
They do not represent the newspaper. When I draw something, I do not represent the Jackson Hole Daily. No way.
Yeah.
They don't pay me enough to be representing them. We got an instruction here that why does it matter why do you think political cartoons matter or make a difference in journalism?
I mean, that's kind of what you were just talking about. It's an interesting divide because it is a personal opinion, kind of like an opinion piece. I think the opinion section of a newspaper does make a difference in journalism, even though many articles in the paper are factually reported. I think it's important to have a opined kind of perspective.
Yeah. And political cartoons boil off all of the talk and boil it off to something easily understood. I think that's sometimes a problem for us as cartoonists, is that editors slave away at these editorials. and they work for hours to get every word in them just right. And we cartoonists come along, and we make it look oh so easy, and we draw these drawings, and nobody ever cuts the editorial out of the newspaper and puts it up on the refrigerator and says, gee, what a great editorial. Well, maybe your mom, my mom, my mother was a librarian, and she didn't, but most people don't, they don't do that. They cut out the cartoon and put it up on the news, on the refrigerator, because we boil off everything to its simplest term.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean,
that's what's important in journalism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I worked for a design firm in Boston, and they hired cartoonists to help them take these really complex ideas about users and the product design and the problem they were solving and the audience to actually illustrate it so that the whole team could just look at a picture and be like, oh, I get exactly who we're designing for, or like, I'll never forget this.
That's what it does. That's what we do in journalism. Unfortunately, we are not as popular as we once were. As I said, Jackson is fortunate
to have total bubble world.
It's a total bubble world. Yeah, and it's got two. You and I both. You kind of represent a younger generation, and I obviously an older one. You deal with kind of a specific cultural element, and I'm dealing with Wyoming and the West.
You have a harder job. It's easy to make inside jokes with friends. Sometimes.
Yeah, I can't make inside jokes except using All in the Family. That inside joke for my generation.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like similar to memes, it's interesting to see it as the internet has allowed everyone to be in their own silo and see their people and be a part of their group. I mean, do you see cartooning as a whole and editorial cartoons in particular fracturing out into people only consuming comics that are in their echo chamber?
But we have that problem. We have that problem with everything. We have another question. How did the Charlie Hepto murders affect you? In my case, although I do draw internationally, and I, in fact, knew a couple of the cartoonists who were killed, it has not really changed the way I draw. I tend to treat just like the First Lady, I tend to treat religion with a certain degree of deference. I know that there is no reason to needlessly inflame the religious passions of people without awful good cause. But I don't have reason to be drawing the Prophet Muhammad either. That's not somebody who's not up in my radar screen nor yours. So no, I don't think it. I don't live in fear of someone storming into my house and shooting me. Brian, you have a question.
What software do I use to draw? That's a good one. And I think I just switched actually from using a pen and ink. I had really cheap pens on paper, and I was using a Wacom tablet and Photoshop to color underneath. I moved over to an iPad about a year ago, and it's been a game changer. I think the cost of being able to have a screen with a stylus that takes pressure and angle with a huge online community to help you refine brushes and color and techniques has been really cool. And I think just like having a camera on your phone has turned everyone into a photographer, I think as these technologies come down and there's videos and a community to learn how to draw it, I really see the iPad and digital illustration as a way that's maybe democratizing cartooning.
Okay. And we have a similar question for me, which is how long does it take you to draw a cartoon? Well, first of all, unlike Ryan, I'm a Neanderthal, and I still draw with pencils and pens and pieces of paper. And in fact, I'm such a Neanderthal. I'm one of the last political cartoonists left still using lithographic crayons, which is a real antique procedure. How long does it take me? I am known in the profession. There is an association, American Association of Editorial Cartoonists, The AAEC. This comes about as close as we get to a union in this life. And I am known among editorial cartoonists as one of the fastest cartoonists working today. Pat Oliphant and I, somebody suggested once that we should have a race to see who could draw the cartoon the fastest. It takes me from the time I pull out the piece of paper, because remember, the job here is thinking up the cartoons. It's not drawing the drawings. That's not the job. As I always have to tell editors, that is not why you're paying me. You're not paying me to sit and draw on pieces of paper. You're paying me to think up ideas.
It's not why I'm banging my head against the wall either.
But from the time I pick up a piece of paper until I have the finished ink drawing is about 30 to 40 minutes.
I'm right there with you, actually. I maybe sketch out 1 to 3 layouts of how I want it to go. And the iPad using Procreate as a software has made that really quick.
So, and I just kind of do it the old-fashioned way, because I keep trying all these technological innovations and keep coming back to pen and paper.
I like the digital because it does allow me to tweak a caption. I would say sometimes.
Oh, I do that. Yes. Yeah. I made a special font on my computer, which is my handwriting.
Yeah, I think that's
because
the next
I am
step
notoriously bad speller, and it used to be this nightmare to change a caption when I misspelled some word in it.
There are different parts of your brain.
Yeah,
I have a lot of birthday cards I did where it was HAPY birthday because I was focused on the bubble letters.
So, I do use a computer, and I scan, obviously, the cartoons because they get sent by email every day. And I do fix things in it, where mistakes are or little glitches in the drawing. Today's cartoon is about the National Weather Service sending out a false tornado warning all across the Midwestern United States.
It's a political tornado.
Well, I have the guy looking at his phone and the little message windows from the National Weather Service, and it's saying wolf.
To the kind of question about, is it the caption or the illustration that comes first? I would say it's never quite the same. For me, maybe the setup of the people, and I'm like, man, that's hilarious. I really want to draw it this way. And I'll still be workshopping the caption as I'm drawing it, and even after I've maybe made a text bubble too. I think you're smart. I see your technique of just doing a line because you can change
I don't have
without having empty space
into a square.
I play with kerning a little bit.
I think the best cartoons are the ones that don't require any caption at all. That's why the I'm with stupid cartoon worked so well, was because I didn't have to have anybody say anything. But
they're quick and universal.
Yeah, but that said, I usually start with a caption and then try to fit the drawing into what I want the people to say.
I think political cartooning and editorials in particular, it is a little more caption based because there's a lot of nuance and specific facts that you're kind of juggling.
And of course, we get away with, we political people who like myself who deal, you deal more almost with a cultural cartoon.
Totally.
And I deal really with raw politics, and it's kind of raw. I do some cultural cartoons. I do some weather cartoons because I draw for agricultural newspapers. I draw lots of weather cartoons. They're great because nobody's going to get mad at you because
they get mad because I keep making weather jokes, but
it's when you deal with this raw, really raw political process, you do tend to be putting words. We get away with murder. Oh my gosh, we get away with things no writer would ever in this world be allowed to get away with.
I'm always trying to find the line, and I think I figured out a way to print butt crack in the paper for the teaser tomorrow. There's a ski line called butt crack, and with the context of a small town and people being like, okay, I know that's a ski line. I can get away. I'm like trying to tow it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The greatest, I think the best, it was one that Dick High really loved and wouldn't run because Rob Hurlis wouldn't have let it into the paper. Because he was always coming up to me and say, remember, Greg, we're a family newspaper. People people are going to be, their children are going to be reading this. So we can't, and it was, now, Ryan, you don't remember this. Probably almost nobody does. But if you remember back in the Reagan administration, there was a proposal to put nuclear missiles on rail cars and drive them around out in the desert so that the Russians wouldn't know where to target
hit them.
Thing. Yeah, well, of course, they would have just saturated bombed the whole desert, to get them all. But and it was first proposed to be out in the deserts in Utah and Nevada. And then the Mormon church in Utah came out and said they were opposed to it, which of course sent the Air Force packing. And where they ended up was in Wyoming, where they were going to do it outside of Cheyenne, out there where the missile range is. And I drew this cartoon of this beautiful woman labeled Wyoming, and she's dancing with this Air Force colonel. And she's saying to the Air Force colonel, is that MX in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?
Yeah, that's
the greatest cartoon that never got used.
I have the same folder.
And it's really too bad.
Maybe to kind of to keep the political cartoons sharp and witty and like that, they should put a bunch of cartoonists on a train and drive us around so no one can find us. I'd love to reintroduce Sean and thank everyone for hanging out with us and having a conversation. Cartoons are fun for us as they are for you. So really appreciate getting to talk more about them. And Greg, really nice chatting with you.
Thank you.
Really love your work.
Nice to meet. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we don't see each other. This is the thing that people don't realize. Ryan and I did not know each other until this arrangement came up because I work remotely and he's right there in Jackson, lovely place that it is.
Everyone's remote.
Everybody's remote.
Well, Sean and Wyoming Humanities Think Why, I really appreciate you guys putting on this program.
Well, Greg and Ryan, thank you so much. I've been smiling the last hour. I think it's really fascinating to me that to understand the context of your work, there needs to be a basic cultural knowledge, a basic commonality, even though we may be coming from different places politically, culturally, there are things that bind us together that allow us to make sense of what you're getting at in your work. And I think that's really cool. So thank you so much. Again, to our viewers, you can learn more about these two gentlemen on What's Your Why podcast, produced by Emmy DeGrappa. You'll find them on our website. This particular Wyoming Connections was made possible by a grant that we've received through the Mellon Foundation and the Federation of State and Humanities Councils called Why It Matters. And to the award winners for the caption contest, we will be in touch with your prizes. Thanks to everyone, and keep on smiling. Keep on making us smile. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Greg.
Appreciate it.
Take care.